Chapter 6, Nanny. As predicted, rain pelted down in torrents through the night, pounding like thousands of hammers on the roof, cascading in sheets off the edges. On the ground, all around the periphery of the barn, water smacked down with such force it carved out trenches, which filled with more water, which only amplified the sound of more rain bucketing down. At 6 the next morning, when the sky unusually would have started to lighten, it remained dark as charcoal. The storm was really just beginning. The full brunt of it was still forecast for tonight. Burdock awakened and made a few exploratory stretches. He was hungry. He would go to the feed room. Sometimes he caught mice there. As he descended the narrow corner stairs, Burdock suddenly heard on top of the steady rain a series of unfamiliar sounds. A scrabble, a few clunks, and an abrupt, loud thump. Then oof! What on earth? Burdock crept down the remaining stairs and angled his whiskered head cautiously around the corner. "Nanny!" he gasped, spying the goat standing profoundly, if a bit shaken looking, in the central aisle. "How did you get out of your pen?" "I jumped," answered Nanny, giving her body a good wiggle back and forth. Bits of hay and dust drifted down from her coat. In the night, Nanny had had a thought. "I'm a goat," she thought. It might not seem like much of a revelation, but in a way, it was. Until now, Nanny didn't do all the naughty things that goats elsewhere were notoriously known to do. She didn't chew the bumpers off cars, or munch through tin siding like it was lettuce. She didn't bash posts with her powerful horns, and she didn't jump fences. But she was a goat, and goats can jump. "You jumped?" asked Mrs. Brown, who was awake now too, and looking in wonderment over her stall. "That must have been the small earthquake I just felt." "I crashed into your wall," said Nanny. "What's going on?" came the sleepy voice of Figgy. Her pink snout pushed through her pen's cracks. "Whoa, Nanny, look at you! How'd you get out there?" "I jumped," said Nanny again. If you were looking for it, you would have seen just a slight raising of her tufted chin. "How unruly, Nanny!" exclaimed Figgy with real appreciation. "Here," said Nanny, "I think I can do it again. Let me show you." Burdock stepped to the side, well out of the way, as Nanny backed up to Mrs. Brown's stall, ran a few steps, and sprung up over her pen wall. For just a moment, Burdock thought she wouldn't clear it. But only Nanny's hoofs clacked on the top rail, and she landed successfully, albeit with a thud, in the hay. "Mama!" came Tick's voice, then a laugh. In a moment, Nanny was back in the central aisle, striking the boards of Mrs. Brown's stall. "Very graceful," said Figgy. "Well done." By now, the horses and Fluff were awake too. "No way!" exclaimed Fluff. "Let's all do that." Before the others could explain that sheep are not springy like goats, there was a scrabble of hooves, and Fluff's expectant face appeared briefly above her pen's edge. Burdock could tell she really thought she was going to make it. She didn't. There was a crash, followed by a dull but significant crunch in the hay. It sounded like a bag of feed had been dropped from a not inconsequential height. "Ooch!" came a faint voice from the depths of the straw. "Oh dear, you okay in there, hun?" asked Nanny, moving forward to peer into Fluff's pen. "Just fine," called Fluff gaily. Fig snorted, Tug chuckled, and Tick bobbed up and down, finally falling back in the hay and giggling a bright, bubbling laugh. He hadn't really laughed in a few days, and it felt good. "Fools rush in!" exclaimed Tug. Suddenly, Burdock noticed something. The latch on each pen, he saw now, was nothing more than a big rectangular block of wood, nailed straight through the middle, with one strong spike. Turn the block horizontally, and the gate wouldn't budge. But turn the block vertically, and the gate could easily be pushed open. The block latch on Figgy's gate, for example, looked like this. "Wow," breathed Burdock. "Wow what?" asked Figgy. "I see how Nanny might be able to get you all out," answered Burdock. He pointed out the blocks to her. "Couldn't you turn those?" he asked. Nanny stared at them for a few minutes. "I see what you mean," she said. As everyone watched, Nanny walked around so that her body was parallel to the wall that fronted the pens. She took a few steps, bucked up with her hind legs, and lightly butted underneath Figgy's block latch. The block rotated up fully upright, and then continued to turn more, like the hand of a clock moving backwards from its original position at 3 to vertical 12, back a smidge farther to 11. Nanny had knocked it just a touch too hard, swinging it past the open vertical position again to locked. "Try from the other side," offered Burdock. Nanny came around to the other side of the block and repeated her efforts, only now she tapped the block ever so slightly. It pivoted to the right a notch and rested peacefully upright. "Push, Figgy!" she exclaimed. "Push your gate!" Figgy did, and the gate swung easily open, and Figgy dashed out into the wide open aisle too. She spun in a circle, reveling in the unexpected freedom of it. Nanny had gotten her out. "I'll be darned," said Pull, leaning forward. "Far out!" exclaimed Fluff. "You're a bright spark, Burdock," said Tug. "And you're a jack-be-nimble, Nanny." "If that doesn't beat all," said Figgy, drawing out each word and looking at first Burdock and then Nanny, in a way she never had before. Burdock sat back on his haunches, enjoying the feeling. Under the pressure of a terrible situation, the barn animals were turning out to be thinkers and doers.